Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Been a week since we last talked, and when we were all together there over in Stirling having a great time a week ago. Time flies in. We're already planning another one. We'll do that soon. But there's bits and bobs been happening. Some interesting, some not so interesting, some so boring. But we're going to talk about them all. And where better to start than the biggest thing that's going on in Scotland just now, which of course is the World Cup draw. And last night we saw a programme for 2 hours that I find hard to describe. But maybe perhaps we'll start with the great John McGinn had something techie. Going to put out what John McGinn was saying about the show last night, the 2-hour extravaganza from Washington. Yes, losing the will to live. Phil, it was an absolute bore fest.
I know. Well, funnily enough, I actually didn't watch it. I was travelling.
Good decision.
Well, I know, but I've seen clips for it, and even and some of the stuff I've heard and talked to folk about it. For the one I think reported, it was like all kinds of awkward. It's like awkward in every shade. It's like cultural clashes, faux pas, people not understanding what they're talking about, audio issues, disjointed transitions, the jokes just didn't work. I mean, get some Europe, get some British humour in there. American humour is completely different. It's I mean, from the clips I've seen, that were just cringeworthy. And it took a while to get the actual draw done. And even when it was, there was some moments that were more than just a wee bit messy. Like, how you just twist one half of the ball, you unscrew and it opens, right? Well, apparently not that easy in America. Or soccer, or as they call it, football everywhere else. I mean, we're calling out the ceremony for being a complete mess. I mean, the jokes are coming thick and fast. There'll be more. I'm actually going to watch the rest of it because I've probably seen most of it now. All the clips I've seen that have been sent to it was just it's human. It's just basically cultural change, one of the greatest events, the greatest sporting event in the world.
Yeah.
The whole world is passionate about this, loves it, understands it. But Americans, we don't need your jazz hands. We don't need your razzmatazz. What we want is a fair and decent draw, which we kind of didn't really get, to be honest, which is the whole point of this. But never mind. So, but we're going anyway. And they better learn from the lessons in Germany and get more beer in. Remember, Roddy, what happened when we were last in Germany?
Munich ran out of beer. The heartland of German beer, ladies and gentlemen, they ran out of beer. We had to search for pubs. And we weren't alone, as you can imagine. There was, I don't know, 200. They figured that 4% of the entire Scottish population was in Germany, and they were all wanting a beer at the same time. It was great, and hopefully America will be as good. But even that last night was more like a tribute to Donald Trump. You know those things you see on social media with Don Rickles, where he's roasting, Dean Martin or Frank Sinatra or then President Reagan. This was more like a tribute to Donald Trump by Gianni Infantino, whatever you call him, the FIFA president, than actually a World Cup draw.
We're laughing about it because it was so pathetic, but actually the award to Trump of the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize, it rolls off the tongue, of course, as if it was a surprise, calls into question absolutely the question of whether FIFA is neutral.
Yeah.
And the kind of comments that were made were totally out of order. What Trump himself said was that he was honoured to be receiving this because he had saved tens of millions of lives through diplomatic interventions and he had stopped wars happening just before they started. I mean, seriously, what planet is that man living on? And he's the guy with the finger on the button. That on its own is a major concern that he's awarded a peace prize given his behaviour towards women, his criminal record, and all the other stuff that is known about him. I can say what I want because I'm not planning to go to the World Cup, Roddy, but don't associate yourself with my remarks just in case you get banned and you don't manage to get...
I've just written, while you were talking there, Eva, I just actually like to write down the next question. I've just written down there, disclaimer for ICE and Homeland Security. The views of the panel don't necessarily reflect that of the interviewer, if you're listening, ICE and the Homeland Security. I think he's a wonderful person. Everything he does is great. Fantastic. Brilliant. Greatest guy ever.
Well, I definitely don't, and I'm not going to eat my words now. In terms of entertainment, I didn't watch it. I was reading clips on Twitter. I was in the car, not driving, obviously, and watching it unfold, and could see people were getting madder and madder and madder and more impatient just to get to the bloody draw, to bring back Rod Stewart. So ultimately, it was not an entertaining evening whatsoever. The draw itself was disappointing. It would have been far more entertaining if they'd had Ted Christopher and the Tartan Army entertaining everybody singing "We'll Be Coming" or something to that effect, rather than what we saw, which was just horrible, tatty. Not what you want for the beautiful game, and not what you want when people are looking forward to knowing who they're going to be playing, getting excited, wanting to talk about the game, talk about Scotland's prospects. And instead of the people of Scotland being able to get excited and get all worked up about who's it going to be, where's it going to be, it seems to me that everybody sat there for the best part of a couple of hours just incredibly frustrated and particularly concerned about what will next year actually bring. If this is what the draw is like, what the heck is the actual World Cup performance itself going to be? How much more will America manage to embarrass themselves?
Yeah, I was wondering, that woman with the big red flat hat, come on, looked like a saucer in her nut. I was trying to say, what's the connection here between the World Cup soccer and this woman singing, who was accidentally dross? She'd been singing at the Barland, she'd get pelted with tomatoes. But here, the other thing about it, I mean, it was so amateurish, Alan, when they had Heidi Klum, big, tall, blonde, darling model, 6 foot plus, wearing high heels, so she was nearly up touching 6.5 feet, and Kevin Hart, who was in a black outfit, and all you could see was his head because the backgrounds they had behind him, all you saw was this wee head. And then when they brought on Shaka, the big basketball player, he is about 7 foot something, it just looked ridiculous. And his jokes, as Phil was alluding to, American type humour, and you could see the whole audience sitting like, terrible.
I mean, I've supported Scotland and Dundee United all my life. So I have seen some real horror shows when it's connected to football. But I have never seen anything like that in my life. I mean, my God. I mean, even at the end when they were singing YMCA and the audience stood up and turned their back to them, they were singing YMCA. Shouting, why? And my God, it was just embarrassing. But I mean, Trump getting a peace prize from FIFA. Now, we were criticised by unionists last week for talking about football and bringing it into politics.
Correct.
What is this? This is highly political because not one member of FIFA got a vote on this. Not one member of the SFA got a vote on whether this is acceptable. It was the president of FIFA who took the unilateral decision to give this man a peace prize. Mm-hmm. Now, Donald Trump has done as much for peace in this world as the SNP has done for independence in Scotland. Nothing at all. So why are they giving him a peace prize? And they say it's the first peace prize of FIFA. It'll be the last peace prize of FIFA because they've never done it before. And I'll guarantee you they will not do it again because this was just sucking up to Donald Trump. But I mean, the president of FIFA, when he was giving his real riveting speeches, he went on about Canada, shout Canada, America, USA. And then he went to Mexico and they all shouted, Mexico. I was waiting for an ice raid. I thought it was a way to get them out. But there we go. I mean, that's how much peace Donald Trump believes in. He's taking his troops out of war-torn areas to put them on the streets of America. The Tartan Army will be coming up against the ICE folk on the streets. I wouldn't like to be involved in that fight because I know who would win it. And it wouldn't just be the beer. But no, I mean, the draw itself, I'm quite pleased with the draw. I mean, we've got Brazil, who are not as good as what they were. No. They're not the team of the 70s and 80s. So, and we've got them on the last game of the tournament, or the group stages. And I think by that time, Brazil should already been qualified, so they may just relax themselves for the next game. So we should be able to, if we get off to a good start in the first one, and I've got to say, I'm a wee bit worried about that one more than any other game. Because I remember the Perus, the Irans. Scotland's really got to pick up their game. Learn the lesson from last year. Put your hearts and soul into this match, because the people of Scotland are relying on you. They are 100% behind you.
Yeah.
So please, and hopefully, by the time you get there, we will already be in the negotiations for an independent Scotland, because elections will be in May before the World Cup.
Yep, and that should actually be quite good, because I would imagine English television will actually infuriate the Scottish voters between now and May, talking about how England. I mean, I actually heard they were talking about who they were playing the semi-final. It was before they were playing a big team. The draw hadn't even finished being made, and they were already talking about who they were playing in the semi-final. I thought, oh yes, that's worth another 1,000 votes. Keep going, boys. Keep it up. Good on you. But here's the thing: the Americans are known for regime changes, as you know, Phil. And it's not that long ago. People shouldn't forget that it was the Americans, who don't even call it by its proper name, who made the raids on FIFA and replaced and brought Seb Blatter and Michael Platini and had them removed. And then this guy appeared who is very pro-American, very pro-Trump, very Zionist as well, supported that, defended Israel in the tournament, was quick to throw Russia and Belarus out, and they said, oh, the politics aren't in sport. And the other one is, the Iranians were only allowed 4 visas to the draw. Other nations, like Scotland, had about 10, 20 people there, England, 20 people, whatever. But the Iranians were restricted to 4. No tournament, no sporting, never mind what side of your things you're on. It's a sporting global tournament. The politics of the nation that's hosting it should not be brought into play.
Correct, but that was on display for everyone to see. And it's basically because our institutions are the institutions that purport to represent the people of all these nations, be it the European nations and the EU, the UN, the world nations, or any institution, national institution, have been corrupted and have been filled with individuals who've been bought and sold. This comes down to governments, it comes down to legislative bodies, comes down to the nuclear inspector program, who told stories to the Americans and the Israelis to allow the Americans and the Israelis to bomb and kill nuclear scientists in their home in Iran, in large blocks of apartments, along with 75 other people, just to make sure they got rid of them. Our institutions are completely corrupt. And what we want, when I look at something like this, the rage of what happened, particularly in relation to the Peace Prize. Obama got a Peace Prize, okay? And Trump wants the Nobel Peace Prize. That's the ultimate. That's the wee bit of gold ribbon he wants, because Obama got it and he thinks he's better and he wants one too. Obama bombed a different bombing campaign for each one of his 8 years in office, and he got a Peace Prize. That shows you how corrupt the Nobel Peace Prize is. This Nobel Peace Prize that he wants, and this was invented just for Trump to kiss his ass. It's cringe. That's the bit that should make us angry. We're getting this political, retaining the American and Western hegemony around the world rammed down our throats on events that it's completely not suitable to be having this at. This should have been about football, the beautiful game. It wasn't. It was about corruption. It was about ass kissing. It was about making sure that the Americans got the glory and that we're coming to the States because it's the greatest country on earth. Well, friends, the greatest show on earth is coming to a country, but it ain't the greatest country on earth. And just watch the opening scenes of the newsroom for that. America's not the greatest country in the world anymore. It used to be. It used to be when it reached for the stars, and just you'll know that narrative when you see it. So no, I was completely scunnered, and obviously Roddy's went for a wee wander. Maybe he's having technical problems. That's just the way it goes. But the rage that we should feel about this is palpable. When I see Trump trying to get this Nobel Peace Prize, when we know that this Nobel Peace Prize, it would have been given to Trump, because the Nobel institution is now corrupt, but it actually went to a woman in Venezuela who's calling for America to invade it and bomb their own people. A peace prize. That's who it went to. This they want to replace Maduro. She's a shill. She's pro-Israel. She's pro-America, and she wants these people to come in and bomb our own country, our own people. A traitor. It's basically a traitorous person, right-wing, neocon, pro-fascist, pro-Israel, pro-America, and it's all about resources. There's the narcotics. All you need to do is go on the website of the Homeland Security, and you will see that the estimate is 4% of illegal drugs come into America from Venezuela. The vast majority come in from Colombia and Ecuador, and they're controlled by the Americans, patsies, and that's what America wants through the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe Doctrine, 200 years old, Scottish-American, put in place. No one comes to the West. Well, we'll have to think about this, but if Roddy doesn't come back soon, maybe we'll have to start this one again. You know how it goes. But anyway, on to that one.
Thanks for that, Phil. Moving on, if I may, Eva. This week it was also Donald Trump actually running through our theme through our podcast this week, because he's involved in everything. And there was a tech, if you could stick up that picture or that clip we've got about the prices of drugs. The UK, through Star, has agreed with Trump to pay 25% extra to US drug companies. Because it's like his tariff thing. He's trying to equalise the costs in America to everywhere else. Of course, in America, they're overcharged dramatically. So instead of saying, well, cut your profits and bring the price down, instead they want the world to start paying more. I mean, it's really a nonsense, an economic nonsense as well.
This completely does my head in. The full item refers to the UK agreeing to pay 25% more for new medicines by 2035 as part of a US-UK drug pricing deal that will cost an estimated additional £3 billion per annum. Now, it won't be £3 billion per annum. You can easily double that, because that's what always happens with these things. But the transatlantic agreement will also see the health service in England double the percentage of GDP it allocates to buying such products, blah, 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 blah. This is just another element of corruption, and it's hugely important, and it's very significant, in part because of the economic impact, but also because it shows you the motivation and the priorities of the Westminster government. It's about profits for the pharmaceutical industry. It's about sooking in with the Americans. What it's not about is getting value for money, and it's certainly not about having due regard to actually looking after people's health. Because if they were doing that, they would be negotiating entirely different deals where health is the priority. And this is a move further and further and further away from an NHS that's free and available to all at a point of need. It's also quite reminiscent of the investigations that have been done by various brave people to establish who in the pharmaceuticals industry has been paying money to political candidates in the UK. And one of the worst examples of that are the companies that produce puberty blockers, who were found to be supporting many candidates who were elected, in particular to the Scottish Parliament, and some of them are also sitting in Westminster. So it's a very dirty business when you get the pharmaceutical industry involved in politics. And that's exactly what this is. Hugely disappointing. And from a Scottish perspective, what we should be doing is dissociating ourselves from this, because it's profiteering at the expense of people's health. It's nothing other than that. And it's just yet another reason amongst, a whole line of others as to why we've got to get out of that cesspit that Westminster has become. This is just another example of that. And we need to have no truck with it whatsoever.
I absolutely agree with you. Alan, I don't know if it was Phil's great hero George Carlin or it was Robin Williams who said that congressmen, senators, MPs, MSPs should actually be like IndyCar drivers. No, not talking about you, Gordon. No, with their sponsors on their their fireproof jackets. Maybe our MPs and MSPs should carry sponsorship, and so we know who's paying them.
Or better still, we'll make sponsorship illegal.
Correct.
I mean, we stop them from being able to
Lobbyists.
invest. If they have got shares in companies while they're members of parliament, they should be banned or forced to sell them, because they should not have anything else other than the interests of their constituents at heart, because that is what their job is. But I mean, this is classic Westminster politics. Big Pharma says jump, and they ask how high. We have got massive buying power. We are a national health service that is buying bulk equipment, and that should go for something. But it certainly shows one thing that we should be looking at very closely, and that is a nationalised pharmaceutical company. Because let's not forget, these companies claim that they need the money to reinvest into creating other drugs. Most drugs right across the world are created by funding from people. I mean, we have an organisation, well, I have an organisation called FOXG1 syndrome. It is a condition that Megan suffers from. We have a foundation ourselves that we raise money for to do investigations and try to find drugs that will help. Now, we are paying every single thing for this. 2 of the scientists who are looking into this have a FOXG1 child. So they are our top scientists. They're neurologist scientists. But when we find a drug, we cannot license that under our name. It has to be a big pharma, and they set the prices. We get nothing in return, except for being able to buy this drug back from them. It is the biggest con job in history. And we all know there is already cures for many conditions out there, but it would cost the pharmaceutical company too much, not because of the price of these drugs, but because of the money that they will lose on the other drugs that they're giving people just now just to maintain their condition. Pharmaceutical companies are there for a profit and profit only. And it's time that we change that system. And we have a chance to do that in an independent Scotland by pushing through a nationalised pharmaceutical company, or at least putting in profit margins cap to stop them from benefiting from the sick and the most vulnerable people in our society. And until we get pharmaceutical companies under control, we will always have people dying, not just from the disease that they have, but through the poverty, because they cannot afford to pay for their medication. Nobody should have to pay for a medication that will save a life. We are human beings. We talk about human rights. The basic human right is the right to life. So we should be looking at the pharmaceutical companies and looking to see how we can address their issue, which is profit-driven and not health-driven. If you're working within the health services or the health sector, your main goal must be saving lives and helping cure disease, not filling the pockets of yourself or your funders. And at this present time, what I would like is a list, including those who work for the World Health Organization, of those who are invested within the pharmaceutical companies. Let us see why they are pushing certain drugs, why they are pushing the price increases of certain drugs. And I believe wholeheartedly it's because it's filling their pockets. Because it certainly is not in the interest of the sick and the disabled of this country or any other country.
Yeah, quite right too. And the other thing we have to take into account for the NHS throughout the UK, Phil, is that the PFI costs are still, the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary was, it's contracts up, but we still don't own the building, and we owe so much in ongoing. PFI is another big issue, but that also brought another thing in this week, Phil. Techie, can you stick up, with the turnaround with everything and say, well, it's not efficient, if it's whether it be the water companies, whether it be the electricity companies, the railways, the NHS, they're saying now, it's not. And they put a headline this week. Techie, could you stick that one up? That the Scottish National Health Service and all of them throughout the UK are unsustainable. Now, this is classic, them setting up for, well, we have to bring in the private sector. This is going to go the same way, ladies and gentlemen, as the water companies in England, as the railways and everything else that they sell to their pals in the City of London, who then sell it on to foreign vulture capitalists. It's a con.
Yeah, and it's part of the big picture. Both of these questions roll right into each other, and what you got was John Swinney there, who's telling lies, and Neil Gray, who's also telling lies and being completely ineffective as a health minister. In fairness, we get a fraction of what we pay in as tax back as pocket money to spend, and in real terms it drops every year, so services will be dropping, education and healthcare being the main ones. But this is a report that that when you showed us from Holyrood magazine. So what it says was the health service in Scotland is financially unsustainable. It has not improved in line with government commitments. Now, government commitments, that's what the SNP said they'd do and they try and do. And they should. They do represent us, they supposedly. And in this one, they were right to try and make it work, but you're getting less and less money. But what they've said is failing, and the incompetence of the SNP since Alex handed over has been a thorn in the side. More than a thorn in the side, it's hobbled and nobbled the independence movement and their cause. In spite of that, the people are still, in the vast majority, demanding and wanting independence. So what happened here? This was an assessment by Audit Scotland, and they found that activity remains below pre-pandemic levels, despite a 20,000 increase in whole-time equivalent staff since 2019, and a 25% increase in health spending compared with a decade ago. But that's in financial terms. What they're not telling you about is the inflation and what that means in real terms. Almost certainly it's down. More than 20 billion was spent on health in 24-25, and a 3 billion real terms increase from 2019. So you can see now what we're talking about. There is actually an increase in spend, but then there's the cost of living. There's more to that thing, like just what Trump's done there. We'll come on to that in a bit. But this is the annual NHS overview. The Auditor General said, despite health boards making unprecedented savings, cuts in other words, the health service remains financially unsustainable. And when the Scottish Government has made progress in setting out reforms, the published improvement plan lacks clear actions, timeframes and accountability. So this is Stephen Boyle, the Auditor General, says despite increased spending, it's unsustainable, extremely challenging, and to eradicate the long waiting times by the spring of 2026. So it goes on to talk about some of the basic issues here, but the reality is we're the 14th to 16th richest, I can't remember what it is now in the UK, in the world. We're one of the richest countries in the world, theoretically. Of course we can and should afford a national health service for all. But the powers that be want more and more for them and less for us. Revolution time, people. We need the people. We need to take back control over Scotland and its resources. Now, when we look onto the UK, we go back, this ties in with the 25% increase with Trump and the people who are in charge. If you want to see what I actually want to see what the SNP list of individuals who are benefiting from cash from these big investors, from big pharma, that would be very, very interesting. Or how it gets to them through revolving doors and stuff like that. That article by Private Eye. But more of the corrupt thieves at the top are stealing from us. This is what this is about. And these barefaced, corrupt liars speaking at the behest of their masters. All these institutions will say what they're told to say. And the corrupt thieves are the politicians, the media, the Western institutions we talked about. The problem's the same as it always was. It's the so-called elite want more for themselves and less for us. We were warned. George Carlin, the American Dream. In fact, funny enough, when I saw this coming up, I had a wee look at the transcript. And this is a quote from George Carlin. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason it will never ever get fixed again. He also talks about healthcare in this, because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now, the big owners, the wealthy, the real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. And this is the bit he quotes that he nails. Forget the politicians. They're irrelevant. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have the freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land, BlackRock. They own and control the corporations, Big Pharma, the hedge funds, the banks. They've long since bought and paid for the institutions, the politicians, the state houses, city halls, as they call it in America. They've got the judges in their back pocket, and they own all the big media companies. Sound familiar? When in Britain we've got the same 6 men owning 80% of the media, and they control just about all the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. And he goes on, but we know you've got, this is one of the greatest skits I've ever seen and political commentaries I've ever seen. It completely nails exactly what was going on. And this was George Carlin doing this stuff in the 60s. I think the one he did, it's about 4 minutes, 40 seconds long. Got to watch it on YouTube. And they did that in the 80s. He did it in the 80s. And here are we 40 years later, and it's coming home to roost, and it's never been more obvious. It's never been more palpable. And we really, the only solution is, I think the French had a wee solution to this. It's called the guillotine. And sadly, I fear that's where we're going. I fear it's going to take, we have to take not only our freedom for Scotland, but we have to take looking after our own people and the people on this planet in our own hands, because the people that currently are in power are too greedy, too selfish, and quite frankly, they don't give a damn.
No, and his final words in that parody he did, or whatever you want to call it, was, "It's a big club, and you ain't in it."
You ain't in it.
You ain't in it, and that's the truth. We're not. But that one other thing, you're talking about 20 billion was spent on the NHS in Scotland. But we've given 21.8 billion, or committed that to Ukraine. Why not take that 21.8 billion and give it to the NHS in Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland instead of giving it to a regime overseas? Then we might find we could be sustainable. But we spoke earlier, Eva, and two of the things, another extra thing that Phil talked about, the cost of living crisis. Well, in the hospitals, they don't ever switch off the lights or the machines. They're using electricity 24/7. They might be getting a slightly discounted rate, but the cost of that has ballooned, as we know. And as we talked about, the managers, the amount of mid-management you've got, bring back the matrons, I say.
See, I'm going to preface this by saying, as you all know, and most of the viewers know, the Scottish NHS has saved my life and my mobility innumerable times, for which clearly I'm eternally grateful. However, when you've been in hospital as often as I've been, you don't just see the good side of things, you see where things are not working the way that you want them to. And one of the very major problems is that we concentrate on hospitals and we pile money into hospitals, and we do forget about what happens before you get to the hospital. So in recent visits, what I've seen are very many people who could have been treated by their GP, but they couldn't get an appointment, or they could have been seen at a minor injuries clinic, but the waiting times were too long, and so they end up at a clinical assessment unit, or they end up in accident and emergency. So there is a difficulty in that regard, a whole load of other issues as well, which would be resolved if we had competent government and we had a Cabinet Secretary for Health who actually understood what his job's meant to be about. He's like me, he's no medically qualified, so he's no a doctor, he's no a nurse. He listens to civil servants and he apparently takes their advice. What he's needing to do is roll up his sleeves, put on a false moustache, pair of glasses and a wig, and go around half a dozen of Scotland's hospitals and ask the staff there, ask the doctors and ask the nurses what is actually wrong. And what is wrong in terms of financial issues is that far too much money is going on bank nurses, temporary staff, employment agencies and consultancy fees for part-time workers, because this has all been allowed to balloon out of all proportion to what it should be. So the wastage is massive. Funds are targeted sometimes in the wrong areas. And the NHS and health is probably the number one priority of practically every thinking voter in the country. So politically, it's extremely important that the NHS is seen to be run competently. And for several years, it actually was. You saw improvements under Alex Salmond, which included Alec Neil and Nicola Sturgeon, give them their due. Or Alec Neil certainly would give him his due. Nicola Sturgeon did well in that job too, in terms of hospital-acquired infections and the like. But the fact is that the performance in hospitals right now in 2025 is still behind what it was at pre-pandemic. Things have not sped up the way that they should have, and there's a whole lot of work to be done. But the work that needs to be done won't be done without somebody competent in charge, where you've got managers and super managers and chief executives who are accountable and who actually get into trouble when they do something wrong. And the prime example of this at the moment is the chief executive of NHS, Fife, who's retiring, and she'll have a massive package when she goes.
Oh,
but
for
she's
sure.
the woman who authored the letter about the Sandy Peggy Tribunal relative to Sandy Peggy's quite correct, lawfully held gender critical beliefs. But that woman will walk out the door with a massive package, and all the flaws and all the faults on her part won't cost her a penny. But the Scottish government and the Scottish taxpayer will be paying hundreds of thousands of pounds in legal expenses for that case and for very many others. And that is one of many problems within the NHS that are actually political problems. However, go back to basics. If Scotland were an independent country, you would like to think that there would be a competent and, in my view, preferably medically qualified Cabinet Secretary for Health who took advice directly from the people that know what they're talking about, as opposed to headlines that are designed to damage the reputation of the NHS when it still remains one of the greatest institutions in the world. And we shouldn't forget that. But we need to get it right. Otherwise, we're going down the privatisation route, where it'll be your money that determines your life expectancy and the quality of your life. And that's completely and utterly anathema.
Yeah, it never fails to amaze me why we didn't have Philippa Whitford as health spokesman and Joanna Cherry Justice. When you've got two brilliant people like that and they weren't utilised because of politics. I go back to Alan, you're a big advocate for the NHS. You know the NHS inside out better than most for all the things that you've gone through yourself and with your family. But do you agree that the trouble is that there's too many mid-managers and not enough, actually, or too many chiefs and not enough Indians? Is one of the problems.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, earlier this week I had to give a presentation to the NHS Scotland's Children with Exceptional Complex Medical Needs event. And that is one of the biggest problems that we have is top-tier managers interfering as a business when there is actual health issues to be raised. They're more interested in watching the books rather than getting on with the job. Now, the NHS to Scotland wasn't new when it was invented by the Westminster Parliament. We had an NHS before the NHS coming about. It was just run by the Kirks. We were given free health by people who weren't putting finances, they were putting people's medical needs before the money. But this isn't unusual from Westminster, because if they're ever wanting to run things down to sell it off, they bad mouth it first.
Yeah.
I mean, we all remember British Gas, Hydroelectric, British Telecom. Remember Busby coming up with telling you to use the phone? He was sacked because they went into the private sector. But it's the same script. They always underfund it before the sell off. Now, I could hear the British nationalist house jocks in the comments right now, typing frantically away. The NHS in Scotland is devolved. Yes, it is. But the purse strings aren't. The purse strings are controlled by Westminster. So we could only do as much as we can with pocket money from Westminster. Now, we already know that Starmer and Streeting are already starting to privatise the NHS in England. They are more or less reintroducing the PFI, which cost the taxpayers billions of pounds last time they were in. This time, they're not calling it PFI, they're calling it NHS Neighbourhood Health Centres. And they're using the catchphrase of NHS Neighbourhood Rebuild. It's not rebuilding it, it's privatising it. Don't ever forget this. But one other thing that costs the NHS billions of pounds, which has nothing to do with care or medical needs, is public inquiries. The public inquiries are called when someone hasn't done their job properly, mostly through the criminal aspects. They have broken the law. So instead of having public inquiries, are we not having people brought in front of the criminal justice system and stop the cover-up? Because when you get to that stage and people are dying under your watch, That isn't about policy. That is about criminality if you have not done your job properly and fulfilled your legal requirements. I mean, we have the NHS spending billions of pounds doing research and papers on transgenderism, whether we should allow men into women's only wards. The simple answer to that is no. The word is in the name, women only wards. That doesn't mean a man wearing a nightie could go into a women's ward. That means no men are allowed into that ward. So why are we spending millions of pounds doing reports onto this issue when it's clear cut? It does not happen. I'm sick and tired of the NHS wasting money on managerial systems which are there simply to save money. It should be going back to the olden days. Remember when we had, I mean, you've said it a number of times, Roddy, the matron coming in and she is in control of the ward. What she says happens. A cleaner stepped out of line, they were gone quick. Nurse didn't do the job properly, away. The matron made sure that ward run properly.
Well, you just ward sisters. You had a great. The management tier was you had nurses, you had auxiliaries, you had nurses, you had the staff nurses, then you had the ward sisters and the matron in overall charge. That was your management structure, and it worked damn well.
Yeah, because they were medically trained people and knew what was required.
Correct.
But now we have managers who are looking at the figures before they are making any decisions, and we have to get that out of the NHS system. But I warn people now, if you vote for any unionist party, in fact, if you do not vote for a party of independence in 2026, say bye-bye to your NHS as you see it now, because there'll be more privatisation and less health practiced.
It's quite a worry, Phil, that that this is the jewel in the crown of our welfare system is the NHS, and if it's given to the vultures, the financial vultures, life will become even more intolerable. You're on mute, mate.
Absolutely, we know that that's true, and I think we've well covered that. What we are fighting for is our very existence. If the corporations are feeding you, you're not eating well. If the corporations are educating you, you're not being educated. If the corporations are choking you, and the money, because when I went into politics, my dad gave me a very simple piece of advice. He says, look out your window. What's the prospects for your kids? What's the nick of the streets? What the neighbourhoods like? What the housing like? What's the prospects for your wains? What jobs have they got coming up? Are we looking after the weak and the vulnerable in our society? How's the education system? How's school going for the kids? Are they getting the support they need? What about healthcare? Are you getting looked after? Are your people getting looked after? Is there positivity in your society? Is there a community? Because it's disintegrating. And what we're seeing is a move away from the older values. Often the baby's thrown out with the bathwater here with this modern progression. Modern progression to what? Kids wander about on their phones all the time. Higher suicides, deprivation. It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. 1 in 4 in poverty. That's what I see when I look out my window now in Coatbridge, in Dundee, in Alva, and all over Scotland, and where we were in Stirling and all. It's just not acceptable. And for us to wander about with our heads down a hole at an ostrich, and not to see this, not to do something about that is a sin. It's a sin against humanity, because it's getting worse. They're stealing more and more, and it's getting worse. And the desperate state that folk are in, the drug use, is driven primarily by poverty. The desperation that folk feel, and you talk to people in the front line all the time, taxi drivers, ask policemen, ask social workers, ask teachers, ask nurses. It's exactly what Eva was saying. You speak to the frontline people because I saw it when I was in the police. I saw it when I was a taxi driver. I didn't see it. I didn't see it when I lived in the Twee D-side village of Torfins, and I was working as an oil executive in Aberdeen, senior oil consultant, and in a big house. I didn't see it then. Do you know why? Because I was living amongst them. amongst those that would keep us on our knees. And there's a lot of them. I'm not saying that's a lovely, lovely area, lovely neck of the woods, and things are going well in the oil industry. Even that's get the rug pulled under it now. Scottish oil, 96.5% of all the oil in Scottish waters, and where's that benefit going? That's what got me into politics. When I was spending 1.7 billion of BP's theoretically money, well, as I said, kind of joint venture, and I was noticing that most of the money went to London or the corporations, and every time I come back to Coatbridge, it was getting worse and worse. I'm driving through Dundee, and I'm driving through Arbroath, and I'm going, this is not benefit Scotland. Aberdeen was still doing all right. Go to Aberdeen now. Go to Aberdeen now and walk around the Granite City, and you'll see the state it's in now, and the conditions that people are living in, and how desperate things are getting for folk. That's what we should be fighting about. That's what we need to talk about all the time, and we do it. And sometimes we get carried away with some of the deflection and pish that were served up that's supposed to be our leaders leading us into a brave new world. Well, Aldous Huxley-esque for sure. No, the writing's on the wall for these billionaires. We need to stick together, unification, get together. John Swinney, I think you can bugger off, I think, because you're bought and sold. See if you've been bought and sold by the men in grey suits, to hell with you. You've betrayed the people of this country, and you're killing us. You're killing our people. So that's where the guillotine analogy comes in. And you know we're against violence, but by God, if things don't change soon, and it's down to us to do it, it will turn. There will be blood, and we don't want that. We don't advocate violence, but I tell you what, when you're desperate and you can't feed your wains, how can you stop? How can you say to a father, "You've just got to accept it"? Nah. How can you say that for the Gazans? Nah. Anyway. It's time for change. Times for change. The revolution will not be televised, but we're going to do it, and we'll film it as we're going.
There we go.
Rock and roll. Let's do it.
And it has to be in an independent Scotland. This next thing I'm suggesting, Eva, because it'll not happen within the British Union, and that is that in a written constitution, we should would it be advisable to ban corporate donations to political parties, lobbyists getting into political parties, and have state-funded elections and state-funded political parties. Now, that might offend some, but it keeps these vulture capitalists out the way, and it keeps their influence hopefully out the way. Would that be a way to go? You're on mute, Eva.
That's my first pound this year. I nearly made a year without it. Mm-hmm. It depends very much on what your values as a society are, because if you're in politics because you want the betterment of everybody in your country, then clearly exactly what you've just suggested is what we would be doing. That's what we would propose for a written constitution, so that people's rights and expectations were enshrined in law and you knew exactly where you stood. It probably reduces flexibility, but it increases certainty, and those are good things, and they're supposed to be reasonable principles to live your lives by, and by which to order a society and your communities. If that were the case, then you could look forwards to all public services being run with the best of intentions and being operated by managers and executives who also had the best of intentions, because they were unable to be bought. They were not being bought. They were not being sold. Because that's often what you see in politics. You watch something happening and you hear somebody making a speech, and then you do a bit of digging and you discover that they were paid or promoted or used to work beside or went to school with some of the people whose virtues they've just been extolling. And that's just not good enough anymore. People have wisened up to that, in part because of social media, the internet, and folk just talking generally about being able to process information and to get information out there. So yeah, it would definitely be the way to go. But I think a written constitution is only one of many things that an independent Scotland needs to consider in terms of virtue in public life and the expectations that there would be on our elected members. What we should have is an ability to remove them when they don't do what they promised to do, and when their behaviour has become unacceptable. And a case in point, quite honestly, is the SNP are there to get us independence, but they've stopped talking about how to get to independence, other than to say we'll have a referendum one day, someday, somehow, when Westminster eventually allows it. So in a Scottish context, I think it's really important when we are independent that we make sure that those who are elected to govern us remember that they're there to do the job they were elected to do, and that they are accountable to the electorate because they are public servants and they are not there to be gravy trainers, simply and solely there to line their own back pockets.
Yeah. Alan, would you be in favour of that? The state funding political parties instead of corporations, extremely rich donors who, and who do choose the narrative for the politicians?
Yeah, I mean, these massive donations that political parties are getting are obscene. I mean, you've just had the Reform Party receive £9 million from a single person. And for a party who is totally opposed to immigration to accept a donation from someone who now has Thai citizenship and is resident in Thailand, it's a bit hypocritical, is it not?
Oh, British politics.
We don't want these foreigners coming over here, but their party is led by a French citizen, is financed from someone from Thailand. So, I mean, it's funny how their priorities change when it involves money and power.
Yeah.
But that's the problem of party politics. I mean, my belief in the political system is the state should pay for one leaflet of each candidate to go into each house within the country. The rest of the campaigning should be down to these people going to every single door and speaking to the people who they want to represent. Let the people know them, and let the people question them, and let the people hold them accountable. Because the vast majority of people in this country do not know who their elected representative is, which is shocking, because you cannot hold someone accountable unless you know who they are. The vast majority have never seen their elected members, and that's just unbelievable, because a lot of these elected members spend more of their time in the bar in the House of Commons than on the streets within their constituency. That's where the MPs should be and the MSPs should be, on the streets of their constituency, getting the views of the people who have elected them, so they know what way they should be voting when an issue comes up in either the House of Commons or in Holyrood, because they are accountable to the people. They are not accountable to their corporate masters, and they are not accountable to their party leaders or their party whip. They should be listening and taking instructions from their constituents. But, I mean, even those who had big donations are suffering now, because, I mean, the SNP, for yearly donations, they have received approximately £2,000. I would expect to raise that at a school raffle. I mean,
we did.
well, yes, I mean, we raised more or less that at the event last week, and that was one event. But, I mean, the SNP is supposed to be a mass movement, a mass liberation movement, so they keep telling us. Obviously not. But to raise £2,000 in a year is just ridiculous. I mean, we have the advantage that people know that when they donate to Liberate Scotland, it's to get outcomes, not to give incomes to any of our members or candidates, because our interest is solely on freeing our nation from Westminster control. And that is what we are going to be doing. We're not interested in camper vans. We're not interested in little holidays. We're not interested in more paper writing. We're interested in getting on the streets, which costs very little money, but we need bodies to come and help us to get to as many doors as possible. Yes, we will be doing leafleting, which costs money, and that's why we are asking for the donations that we are and raising funds through fundraisers. But every single penny that we raise, unlike the other political parties, goes into our front-line campaigning. Not one of our activists will receive a penny of that money, because not one of us are looking for any expenses. Our reward will be on the day of the election, when Scotland becomes liberated.
Yeah. Outcomes, not incomes. That's exactly what we want. One of the things on freedom of speech, Phil, it's getting, we keep getting told, oh, if you go and live in China or Russia or North Korea or Iran, oh, see what you can say and do there. Techie, can you stick up that? The EU are fining Twitter 140 million euros. And they're doing it, and they're saying deceptive design of its blue check mark, lack of transparency of its advertising repository, and failure to provide access to public data for our researchers. That's one part. Techie, can you stick up the other one? Where in July 24, Elon Musk warned the public that he'd been offered a deal by the EU if he towed the party line, and was more pro-Israel, more pro-Ukraine, didn't support Donald Trump. You got there you go. The European offered an illegal secret deal if we quietly censored speech without telling them, and they wouldn't fine us. Well, when Elon, God bless him, refused to do that, here's what's happened. The fine has been levied on him. Is that a coincidence? You know me and coincidences, Phil.
Yeah, well, obviously it's not, and we talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
The fact that six billionaires own 80% of the media in the West, in the UK, and that's the same story across the West. What the rise of the new technologies and social media has done is put that into the hands of other billionaires who are being bought and sold. The issue here's really what this comes down to as well. It's so this is the European Commission. It's 120 million euros or 150 million dollars for violating transparency obligations under the Digital Services Act. Now, this is the first non-compliance ruling under the DSA. You've already set the scene. We know why. We know why they've done this, because the Musk refused to play by their rules, the rules that keep us in the dark and manipulate us and feed us lies so that they can continue with the never-ending wars that make money for their controllers, the fat controllers. So this is a set of rules adopted in 2022. This is when these rules come into play, that requires platforms to remove harmful content and protect users across the European Union. Well, who makes that decision?
Exactly.
What's harmful and what's not? The fine was issued following a 2-year investigation into the platform formerly known as Twitter. This is like Prince all over again, to determine whether the social network violated the DSA regarding the effectiveness of measures to combat information manipulation and the dissemination of illegal content. Now, the Commission's preliminary findings were shared with X in July of 2024. And the regulations found that X had breached transparency requirements through its misleading the blue checkmark system for verified accounts, its opaque advertising database, and its blocking of researchers' access to public data. Now, the Commission said that the X checkmark misleads users because the accounts can purchase the badge without meaningful identity verification. And this deceptive design also makes it challenging to assess account authenticity, increasing exposure to fraud and manipulation. Well, guess what? Who'd have known it? Even X, Facebook, etc. are for sale and can be bought and influenced. Even the war criminal Netanyahu has a campaign to buy TikTok as it's telling the truth about Gaza. This is more of the same. This is social media being clamped down upon. Now, why is all of this happening? And you can trust, I like what Elon Musk done by exposing the corruption of our institutions, but he's not the savior. I don't trust this guy. He's not charging over to save the poor in Scotland. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't give a shit. He cares about money, and he likes a wee bit of showboating. But there's a deadline right now, rapidly approaching, for the sale of TikTok's operation in America. And it's used by 1/3 of Americans, and it could be banned. So in January, the US Supreme Court upheld a federal law that requires ByteDance, which is TikTok's, wait for it, China-based parent company, to sell its operation or face a nationwide ban. So why is this happening? TikTok's telling the truth about Gaza, and the Americans don't like it. AIPAC are financing it, and the right-hand man of Netanyahu's trying to buy it. And Bibi Netanyahu, in his influencer campaign and program, has stated that the biggest challenge is to buy TikTok because they're damaging us. We need to control that narrative. So this ban went into effect, and the Chinese-owned app, this is owned by the Chinese, stopped working in America for about 12 hours. Then Donald Trump signs an order that delayed the enforcement of the ban for 75 days until April 5th. Then Friday afternoon extended the deadline another 75 days to June. So this is ongoing. What they're trying to do is continue to control what you hear and see, which is why we continue to champion what we do. And what we want is we should point out to everybody the Duran and all the other non-mainstream media sources of information. The truth is out there, folks, but you've got to dig if you want to find it.
Yes, including through a Scottish prism. We cannot be bought. Although I wouldn't mind if someone tried, it throws a few quid, I'm cheap. No, it's even this clampdown. I'm trying to find a clip here that I had. No, I can't find it. But the Pavel of the Telegram, if you remember, he was the CEO of Telegram. He was arrested and taken off a flight in France because he hadn't been transparent. And after he paid a bit of money in France, they let him leave. Freedom of speech doesn't exist in the West, does it? We don't have freedom of speech.
This is Big Brother writ large, and I agree with Phil's comments in respect of not trusting Elon Musk as far as you could fling him, and that's where any sensible person would consider. So I think that what we need to bear in mind here is the fine was imposed by the European Commission, and let us consider what the European Commission actually is. It is the politically independent executive arm of the European Union, responsible for proposing new laws, implementing decisions, upholding EU treaties and managing the EU's day-to-day business and budget. It acts in the EU's general interest with a college of commissioners proposing legislation, blah, blah, blah. And that performance surrounding Elon Musk and X and similar things that you refer to, Roddy, is exactly why we should not be considering at the moment whether or not an independent Scotland would seek membership of the EU. And you know that obviously during the week, John Swinney was quoted as saying that Scotland had to get back into the EU the quicker the better. And he's conflating the two issues of independence and membership of the European Union. And again, muddying the waters and failing to unite our movement. So the example that we're citing there of X and Elon Musk and the European Commission should be a wake-up call, actually, to John, if he's listening and watching, that the EU is not all things to all men and women, and there are some aspects of it that are actually pretty dangerous and take us into dark days, potentially, if not actually. So what I would like to see is John Swinney talking not about what we will do at some indeterminate time in the future as and when we become independent, but what are we doing right now to regain the independence of our country? Because people are sick, fed up, turning on the telly, looking at their phones, checking their social media, occasionally buying a paper and seeing nothing but bad news. All the stuff spoken about today, apart from the World Cup draw, but the NHS or war or financial issues or fuel poverty, all of these things are so important to people, but we can't change all these things dramatically and radically and forever unless and until we've got the full powers of independence. And that's what we should be talking about as either political activists or those who are currently elected politicians or want to be so, is how to get our independence, how to unite the movement, and how to turn next year's election into the election that is transformational, delivers independence, and then we address the NHS, Scotland's position in the world. And all these things are able to be addressed, but only then, not now. And John Swinney is not going to make any difference to the future destiny of the people of Scotland for the better if he persists with his wrong-minded, stupid policy of begging Westminster for another referendum when everybody knows it ain't going to happen.
Freedom of speech is a joke. Now, when we opened up on the World Cup draw, and we were talking about last week, and I made a joke there, jokingly, well, not really, about the disclaimer. But the US are going to check people's social media, and if they don't like what you've said in your social media, if you've been critical of the president or critical of Israel or critical of their action in Ukraine, you could be banned as a football fan from going to the World Cup. it's a joke to pretend that we live in democracies in the West. They're not. They're autocracies.
Yeah, I mean, freedom of speech now to the establishment is you're free to speak on anything we agree with. You are not free to speak on anything that criticises us. Now, during World War II, we've all had family who went to fight. They weren't fighting for Queen and Empire. They were fighting against fascists to give us, their descendants, the right to free speech. We no longer have that. I mean, we are watching every time on the television, we are seeing elderly pensioners being dragged from the ground by the police because they are holding up signs on cardboard condemning the actions of our government. Now, in the 30s, when our grandparents were fighting the Nazis, it was brown shirts they were fighting. But it now seems that we have the yellow high-vis shirts now in this country who are following orders. Never worked during the Second World War, the following orders argument, and it certainly won't work again if you are ever brought back to justice, which you should be, because the police should be refusing to follow illegal orders. This clearly breaches the Human Rights Act, regardless of what Britain tries to bring in. They are hitting our fundamental rights. And if the European Union want to stop misinformation on Twitter or any place else, then why not start taking action against mainstream media for the lies that they keep telling the people of this country and around the world? It's so obvious the lies that they are telling people. We don't believe mainstream media now. And you are the ones who are given the opportunity of people to come onto social media to manipulate other people's opinions. But I'll tell you what is interesting, that they are fining them for this misinformation, but they are not fining them for the misinformation of people who advertise on their networks. And we're coming up to Christmas just now, where we are having unscrupulous fraudsters who are placing adverts on social media platforms, claiming to be selling things at very cheap, reasonable prices. And the people paying that money and never receiving their money or the goods, because it is a con job. They stay on for a wee while and then they quickly put their business out of practice on the national airwaves. But so that's what the EU should be targeting. That a company who advertises or allows an advertisement on their platform should be the ones who are financially liable if the person has been conned. That would do something decent for the people who have put them into power, instead of attacking genuine, innocent people for simply stating their opinion. We have to put up with the opinion of these elected members, which most of us do not agree with. And I would never ever ban them, because they have the right to their views. What they don't have is a right to block my view or the view of anyone else. I mean, Nigel Farage, I cannot stand the man, but I would never ever stop him from having the right to put his views forward. The only difference is, unlike the BBC, I would have someone there who could counter his argument and not give him a platform on his own.
Yeah, here. We're all the same. Absolutely. I'm with you that 100%. No time from or any unions, to be honest, but I respect their right to hold the views they do, because I am what they call a Democrat, and which something is the person who's the head of the commission. As a Democrat, I find it ridiculous that someone like Ursula von der Leyen gets appointed and not elected, and she has such power. She's levied this fine, Phil. She's done all sorts of other things. She stood and said everyone in Europe supports Israel and what they're doing in Palestine. Well, no, they don't. But she's saying they do, and she's committing them to it. Also, this latest thing, now this is probably the last question we've got, and I'd like to bring you in on it, is that, Techie, can you strike that up? The EU is planning to take frozen Russian assets and give them to Ukraine. Belgium is holding out. And of course, they're now going to attack us, oh, you're pro-Putin, the usual, all the old stuff. They're proposing to take this 105 billion, which is Russian assets, and international law, the Belgians, and I've got to say the Belgian Prime Minister is no pro-Putinist, he's very much against them. And he's against doing this because he said international law states quite clearly, when the conflict's over, Russia will be entitled to get their assets back. We didn't do this to Nazi Germany during the Second World War. So they're saying doing it, they're all pro-Putinist. And the whole of the EU now, we're noticing, and in Europe, are getting very anti-Donald Trump because he's trying to bring a peace to Ukraine. And this is just all part of this lack of democracy, the lack of transparency that they're fining someone for.
Yes, this is the corruption of our institutions, and who are we're talking about and what happened. So the EU is working for the people of Europe. That's what we want, right? That's what we want, but it's not. It's currently working for those that control us. Just look what von der Leyen is saying. She destroyed the German military, a shamble under her when she was the Federal Minister for Defence in Merkel's government. They negotiated the Minsk Accords 1 and 2 with Russia and later admitted it was a ruse and a lie to allow the West to rearm the Ukrainians. Then there should be no surprise that she now leads the EU and she's doing exactly the same. Warmonger and blaming the Russians and trying to continue war. She's a hawk and a warmonger, completely bought and sold by the military and industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about in 1961 when he left office, stating that these guys, the military industrial complex, will seek permanent war. And where are we right now? In a state of permanent war. Now, Al Jazeera reporting all of this. You've got to look to the alternative media. Not all of it's clean, but this is top diplomats from the US and Ukraine are meeting in Geneva to discuss Donald Trump's 28-point proposal to end the war with Russia. Now, the reason there's a bit of dissent and there's an argument about it is that originally it was an absolute nonsense. It was a piece of real estate. Donald Trump doesn't know anything about being a president. You may have picked that one up, but what he does know about real estate, he wanted to turn Gaza into a real estate strip, and have a Trump Tower on it, and then we'll let the Palestinians back in. No, the peace plan's a joke. It's an absolute disgrace. But anyway, the one in Russia is a classic, because here's the problem. Here's the reality of the situation. Russia has won the war that we started. The EU and its leaders can't admit it, as they all lied all the way through. Yeah. They start this war, keep it going, and reporting that the Ukraine are winning and that Russia was suffering. That's what they reported all along. This situation has and will be decided on the battlefield. The penny has dropped to the Americans. They've handed this over to the Europeans to finish it, as the Yanks understand that they can't beat Russia in this war. Now, Trump is coming closer to what Russia wants and will take it as a win. He wants to come in and get his peace prize and stop another war, allegedly. And the Russians are smart enough to give Trump some credit. And that's all, because they know that is all that this colossal, cheesy, narcissist needs if you want to tick a box and get what you want. But the reality is, the Russians have won a war, will dictate the settlement at the end of this conflict, and there's nothing anyone else can do about it.
No, and I stand, and I said it, and you're all my witnesses. I said it from February 22. I said, let's immediate ceasefire, negotiate a settlement, stop the killing. Yes. I was right then, I'm right now, I'm still saying it. But, of course, that makes me, as we all know, I'm a pro-Putinist communist. I'm also, because I oppose Palestine, I'm a pro-Hamas, a Jew-hating Holocaust denier. I'm always
one more thing, Roddy, a wee comment. There's one thing that's come up through this is Article 5, which is the collective defence. It's NATO's most fundamental principle. Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation states that an armed attack against one NATO member shall be considered an attack against all, and that's since 1949. This is changing. If the Europeans are stupid enough to attack Russia, America will not back us up.
Yeah,
Article 5 no longer applies.
Well, the 5's only been called once, and that was after 9/11, and everyone responded to assist America, but they haven't reciprocated. But as I was saying, all those things I've been accused because I've been against the war, I'm against the killing, and I want it to stop now. But I can accept reality. That's the fact. I'm opposed to war. However, you're right. Russia has won this war. And the West won't admit it, because they have to admit then they're wrong. They're saying things like, I've seen it. Senators in America and whatnot say, they've lost 2 million, the Russians, and they're losing 10,000 men a week and all this sort of things. Recently, there was an exchange of dead bodies between Russia and Ukraine, two, in fact. One, the Russians handed over 2,318 dead Ukrainians and got 28 dead Russians back. Then there was another one with almost 2,500 dead Ukrainians, and they get 32 back. Now, that doesn't sound to me like this is the ones that are losing. The war's got to stop. The killing's got to stop. That sooner or later there's got to be an agreement. And the problem we've got with people like van der Leyen and others, they've all got nuclear shelters, folks. We don't. Yeah, and they think they can come out after it and everything will be fine. Nonsense. Anyway, the clock has beaten us. If any of my colleagues, Eva, you look as if you're desperate to say something.
No, I was just agreeing with every word that you just said, Roddy, and the sad fact of the matter is there's wars going on around the world day in and day out, and it is so unnecessary. It's just man's inhumanity to man.
Correct. My favourite phrase, Alan, as I used to my children, is life is simple. It's people that make it complicated. That's the problem with the world, that and greed.
Yeah, and the simplest way to make sure that we live in peace is by voting for an independent Scotland, so as we are not tied to the warmongering Westminster, and we could get these nuclear weapons off our soil and off our shoreline.
Non-negotiable. And we should be like our Irish cousins and have a neutrality in our written constitution. That's what I would like to see, but that's all for after independence. Till then, folks, we'll see you soon. You and yours, please, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.